Thank you for joining our call. My name is Jacqueline Ribeiro. I'm on the communications team at Alliance Defending Freedom, the world's largest legal organization committed to protecting our constitutional rights. We are meeting today to discuss a shareholder proposal on politicized debanking, which was presented at JPMorgan Chase's annual shareholder meeting this morning. The proposal calls attention to several allegations of political and anti-religious bias toward those who hold mainstream American views. In 2022, Chase canceled the bank account of the National Committee for Religious Freedom, led by Ambassador Sam Brownback, who we will speak soon. As you will hear on the call, this is not an isolated example. And as ADF's Viewpoint Diversity Score Business Index makes clear, Chase must correct course at the internal policy level to rebuild trust with its customers, shareholders, and the general public. The Viewpoint Diversity Score Business Index is the first comprehensive benchmark designed to measure corporate respect for free speech and religious freedom. Today, we are launching the 2023 results of the Business Index, which scores 75 publicly traded corporations at viewpointdiversityscore.org. A few notes before we begin. Please remember to keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking. My colleagues are giving you each permission to record, but please send a note in the chat if you're having issues. We are recording the statement portion of the press conference. We will also have copies of the prepared remarks, so please reach out to me after if you need it. State Attorney Generals Daniel Cameron of Kentucky and Steve Marshall of Alabama have also pre-recorded statements, which I will distribute following this call. Lastly, we'll open the floor up for questions after Mr. Oak speaks. Now, we will hear from ADF Senior Counsel and SVP of Corporate Engagement, Jeremy Tedesco.
Good afternoon. Today marks the year 2 launch of ADS Viewpoint Diversity Score Business Index. The Business Index measures major corporations' respect for civil liberties with special focus on leading tech and financial services companies. Its 42 benchmarks and model policies are a roadmap for ending viewpoint-based corporate cancellations, discrimination against employees because of their religious and social beliefs, and corporate politicking that damages free speech and religious freedom. We're excited to report that 8 companies improved their scores in 2023. The 2 companies with the largest jumps, Fidelity Information Services and M&T Bank, up 32 points and 11 points respectively, are also the 2 top scoring companies this year. FIS and MIT's success is a direct result of them being transparent with shareholders by completing the survey we send to each company that we score. Unfortunately, this year's results also underscore that there's much work to be done to forge a business culture that respects civil liberties. JPMorgan Chase is a perfect example. Chase's score decreased from 15 to 9% on the business index this year. With such a low score on respecting religious and viewpoint diversity, it should come as no surprise that shareholders, state treasurers, state attorneys general are raising the alarm that politicized debanking appears to be on the rise at Chase. At its annual shareholder meeting today, a shareholder asked Chase about why it did not respond to our survey. A Chase representative said that they were not aware of the survey, but that conflicts with a Wall Street Journal article just from this weekend, where a Chase official apologized for their prior response to our survey and stated that they are actively considering participating in the survey in its 2023 round. Chase needs to get its story straight. Chase, like so many other companies with low scores in our index, maintains policies that give them unbounded discretion to debank and deny payment processing based on people's views. To build back trust with its customers, shareholders, and the general public, Chase needs to abandon policies that threaten the fundamental freedoms of everyday Americans and commit to completing our survey each year.
Now we will hear from David Bahnsen.
Well, I want to thank everyone who's helped to play a role in the submission of my proposal. I'm particularly grateful to Jerry Boyer and the legal counsel that helped appeal the ruling of JPMorgan to not even give this proposal a listen that was ultimately overthrown by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, ruling in our favor that, in fact, this proposal had a right to be heard. In a very odd way, JPMorgan's action to deny even hearing my proposal was the greatest thing that's happened through this experience, because I think if they had just accepted the proposal and then the board of directors had recommended against voting for it and the vote had failed at the shareholder meeting, it's very likely we wouldn't have this opportunity today to shine a light on what took place and what the real situation here is. In them choosing to deny it, and the SEC, generally not necessarily a friend to the cause that many of us represent, the SEC ruling in our favor provided a exponentially higher amount of spotlight on this entire affair. My position from the beginning has been, as a real shareholder at JPMorgan, not one who took an equity interest in the company at the point at which Ambassador Brownback's account was closed, or at the point at which other various things were coming across the newswire that bothered me, but rather who has been a shareholder now for 14 years, both in my own personal portfolio and on behalf of the billions of dollars of capital we manage on behalf of clients at my firm. We are longstanding shareholders at JPMorgan who legitimately do believe that they are a very good organization at generating returns and profits for clients, that they are a standout firm in the world of banking, and therefore have no excuse to be hurting shareholders through actions that we believe to be discriminatory. The case I would make for the resolution that we put forward is that I was not asking them to assume that there were nefarious things happening with nefarious motives. I was only asking them to assume that the possibility of such was worth looking into, that if they were indeed as focused against religious and political discrimination as they have claimed, and as CEO Jamie Dimon reaffirmed just this morning, if they're so sure that this not only is not corporate policy, but is not happening at all, then a rather routine and I think inexpensive investigation in the grand scheme of things, that inquiry would have been very helpful. And only one of two things could have happened. Either they would have come back with rock solid proof that has not yet been provided as to why accounts were closed and what really was going on. They could have validated one of the different stories that they've told as to why these accounts had been closed. Or they could have come back and said, you know what, there was a breakdown. It was at a regional level or a local level or some other explanation, not necessarily coming from Park Avenue. And that then, therefore, we could come up with some remedy as to how we could avoid this happening in the future, which I think is a better outcome for society, for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, but ultimately a better result for the shareholders and owners of JPMorgan. The answer that JPMorgan has given, that they bank for 50,000 different religious organizations, why would they have only discriminated against 3, 4, 5, or 6 in this case, is an argument for my resolution. Because I certainly agree that they have pre-existing banking relationships with various other church entities or not-for-profits or political groups that would be within a similar ideology or faith orientation as some of the groups that we see evidence of debanking. My point is not that they have a corporate policy explicitly stated, we will not bank for anyone who's a Christian. My point is that they have a breakdown in enforcement of not allowing religious discrimination, that there appears to be inconsistencies that very well could be explained at a regional level, a branch level, and so forth. It's a very large organization. Just the fact that we're referring to it as Chase over and over again on this presser, and I'm referring to it as JPMorgan, shows the size and complexity of the bank. JPMorgan itself hired Jamie Dimon by buying Bank One. They merged with Chase Manhattan Bank. They famously, during financial crisis, acquired Bear Stearns and Washington Mutual, and now just 3 weeks ago acquired First Republic Bank, and the second largest bank failure ever. This is a very large, powerful, capable, and yet complicated organization. An inquiry like ours to assure that there is not religious and political discrimination going on would have been in the best interest of shareholders. And the one thing I am certain of is that the next time a bank manager decides they're going to close an account for somebody like Ambassador Brownback, they're going to think twice about doing it. I do not think the C-suite wants to see this press again. They do not want another story on Fox News on the cover page of the Wall Street Journal. This was covered far and wide by both left-wing press, right-wing press, more financial media, and I do not believe it has looked good upon JPMorgan. I think that even with this resolution failing, that the shareholders of JPMorgan were very well served by this effort.
Thank you, Mr. Bahnsen. Now we will hear from Ambassador Sam Brownback.
Thank you very much. And I agree wholeheartedly with what David just said. I think he's really gone to the heart of this. You know, facts are important in this case. They are in any case. I helped found the National Committee for Religious Freedom, did it to push for the protection of the right to the free exercise of faith for all Americans in all walks of life. We've got a bipartisan national advisory board that includes members who are Christians and Hindus, Jewish, Mormon, Muslims. In April of 2022, we opened a bank account for the NCRF at Chase. We chose Chase because of the national footprint and the multi-generational relationships that our team had with the bank. On May 19th, 2022, I tried to deposit a donation at a local Chase bank in Kansas, and that's when the NCRF discovered that its account had been closed. The following week, we received a letter from Chase dated May 6th, though, saying that they had decided to end our relationship with you. Our account had been opened only 24 days. On June 8th, a corporate representative from Chase called our executive director. The representative said Chase's internal risk management team determined that the NCRF needed to provide additional information, and because the NCRF had failed to do so within 60 days, the account was closed. Our executive director informed her that the account had not even been opened for 60 days, and the NCRF never received a request for additional information. The representative admitted that Chase did not follow its process correctly, but said if the NCRF could provide the following information, Chase might reinstate the account. Number one, the names of the NCRF's donors who contribute more than 10% of its operating budget, the NCRF's criteria for deciding which candidates to contribute money to, and a list of candidates to whom the NCRF plans to contribute money. We have this all in a recording and a transcript. Now, the NCRF respects its donors' privacy and was concerned about disclosing the criteria for dispersing funds, so it declined to divulge this information. In October, over 5 months after they closed our bank account, Chase sent us a letter saying they had to ask these questions to comply with federal banking guidelines to prevent money laundering and terrorism. But by November, Chase pivoted to a different explanation, saying in an email that I am a politically exposed person. Now, the guidelines Chase cited specifically said that politically exposed persons do not include U.S. public officials. So put simply, the rule Chase cited doesn't even apply. This behavior overall cannot be allowed to continue. And that's why I've strongly supported this proposal and the investigation and Chase's internal investigation to determine what actually happened and why in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from General Griffin, Attorney General of Arkansas. Mr. Griffin.
Thank you for your time. We wrote a number of attorneys general in early May, got together, led by Attorney General Cameron of Kentucky, and we wrote Chase, specifically Jamie Dimon, about this, some of the facts that have been cited here today. And we did it first and foremost to educate Mr. Dimon on some of the things that have been happening, because there seems to be a disconnect, as David mentioned earlier, between what they say is the policy, what they say is happening, what's actually happening. They talk a lot about openness and inclusivity, but the reality is when they're asked to define what their standard is for shutting some of these accounts, they're unable or unwilling to do so. We would not allow this sort of viewpoint discrimination in other contexts. And so we wrote this letter, a number of attorneys general, to communicate our thoughts and concerns to Mr. Diamond. The other thing I would say in this particular case is you've got Chase making a play, making a push for business with small brick and mortar banks all around parts of the country where people are conservative generally. There are a number of these right down the street from me. One in particular I think of that I go by all the time. It's brand new. It's in a brand new shopping center. They are really using these Chase brick and mortar bank branches to reach out and try to get more business. Well, the policies that they are pursuing are hostile to the views of a high percentage, maybe in as high as 70% or more of Arkansans. It's just ridiculous. And so part of the reason we wrote this letter is to educate Mr. Diamond. The other reason is to just educate the public on this distinction that's being made or being demonstrated between what they say is their policy and what is actually their policy. And it's not just the fact that they have made these decisions to debank or shut down accounts. It's that when they are faced with it, despite what Mr. Diamond says, when they're faced with these facts, what we've heard either very little or a refusal to take steps to ameliorate these problems and to address the problems. David mentioned they haven't taken the opportunity to investigate. Well, they also have refused invitations to join organizations such as yours that would help give confidence to people. And here's the thing. At the same time, they are advocating for being cheerleaders for groups on the other side of the political spectrum, which makes this even worse. So basically, they are for openness and inclusivity as long as it represents viewpoints with which they agree. If they disagree, then they reserve the right to shut those down. And I appreciate all of y'all bringing attention to this. And I know I and other attorneys general will continue to speak out on this.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Scott Shepard.
Good morning. I'm Scott Shepard, the director of the Free Enterprise Project at the National Center for Public Policy Research. We submit the majority of center-right shareholder proposals each year, and we had a debanking proposal at Chase that was illegally excluded by the SEC staff in their review process. Jamie Dimon sometimes talks a good game consonant with fiduciary duty, not so much this morning at the shareholder meeting, as when he recognized it would be terrible for American corporations to be run by little committees of self-appointed do-gooders according to their personal policy preference. The problem is that's exactly how JPMorgan is run. As the ordeal of Senator Brownback's National Committee for Religious Freedom illustrates, Chase debanks those who oppose discrimination or who disagree with Chase executives' personal policy preferences, and then they lie and they lie and they stonewall about the company's discrimination on the basis of viewpoint. Given a long history of viewpoint discrimination at Chase, the least it could do is to make an honest effort to review that history of discrimination and to try to make things right. A first step toward doing that would be to fill out the survey for the Viewpoint Diversity Score Business Index. For months, Chase has steadfastly ignored repeated calls from us and from other shareholders and from dozens of state officials to participate in the survey portion of the index. It wasn't until this past weekend, as Jeremy noted, that Chase finally admitted in the Wall Street Journal that it had known about the survey all along and had refused to participate while pretending ignorance to the public. Chase needs to participate in that survey, and then once it gets its index score, tout that score with the same vigor that it touts its score on, say, the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index. After all, to get a perfect score on that Corporate Equality Index, as Chase does every year, it has to take aggressive hard left positions on some of the hottest button issues that face the nation today, including the very basic one of whether born girls can even participate in their own sports effectively. After all, too big to fail banks have to be too big to discriminate. All American taxpayers backstop these too big to fail banks, and all of their viewpoints should be respected equally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepard. Now we'll hear from Treasurer Murante.
Good afternoon. My name is John Murante. I am the treasurer of the state of Nebraska. And our message to JPMorgan Chase and other giant multinational banks is really simple. Stop discriminating. Decades ago, the American people united to tell banks to stop discriminating on the basis of race. Now it's time for all Americans to unite again to say to the banks, stop discriminating on the basis of religion or viewpoint discrimination. That's why I have included in the state of Nebraska's RFP process to do banking business with our state a question about whether a bank will submit the Alliance Defending Freedom's Viewpoint Diversity Score Index survey. Because the people of Nebraska deserve to know, and the people of America deserve to know, whether or not the banks which hold their tax dollars are discriminating against them. And people of all Americans, of all religious affiliations have a right to access to the banking sector of America. What happened to Ambassador Brownback is appalling. It's all too common, and it has to end. In Nebraska, we're fighting to end viewpoint and religious discrimination. And across the country, state treasurers and financial officers through the State Financial Officers Foundation have united in a letter to JPMorgan Chase to demand that the era of religious and viewpoint discrimination must end.
Thank you. And now lastly, we'll hear from Treasurer Oaks.
Thank you. My name is Marlo Oaks. I'm the treasurer of the state of Utah. And as the state treasurer of Utah, I've had the pleasure of engaging in conversations with leaders in my state and across the nation over the course of the last year to discuss potential solutions to the politicization of the capital markets through a practice known as ESG, short for environmental, social, and governance. Utah took a stand through legislation passed this session against economic boycotts that seek to cut off necessary capital and insurance from politically disfavored yet critical industries like traditional energy. Economic boycotts destroy livelihoods, increase costs, and do little to advance the desire we all have to breathe cleaner air and improve the environment. Now, I fear that major corporations' environmental activism is spreading in ways that imperil everyday Americans' rights to free speech and religious freedom. I am deeply concerned that Chase appears to be engaged in the politically motivated debanking of groups like Ambassador Brownback's nonprofit, the National Committee for Religious Freedom, as well as other mainstream conservative organizations. The 2023 edition of the Viewpoint Diversity Score Business Index points to concerning indicators of Chase's political and religious bias. The Business Index is the first comprehensive benchmark designed to measure corporate respect for civil liberties. In 2022, as has been noted, Chase received a low score of 15% out of 100% overall. This year, they received only 9% overall. The letter I joined alongside other state financial officers pointed out that Chase could take a step in the right direction by being transparent on the Viewpoint Diversity Score Business Index, an action that in and of itself could improve the financial institution's score. We also encourage Chase to adopt policies that respect the freedom of everyday Americans to access the marketplace without the fear of political or religious discrimination. I am standing up for the people of Utah and for all of my fellow Americans today to ensure that freedom for all is respected by our nation's largest, most powerful corporations.
Thank you all. Now we will open the floor for Q&A. If you have questions, please remember to unmute yourself and remember to please state your name and the organization you're with. And if you're calling in, you can press *67 to unmute yourself.
My name is John Rhee with the Standing for Freedom Center at Liberty University. Am I being heard?
Yes, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Thanks for those words. This is indeed concerning to see these kind of political operations happening in what should be a very general, neutral playing field. So, Chase CEO, who's been named multiple times already, Jamie, says that Jamie and others, other executives are unaware of the score that we referenced, and also they deny any debanking of Sam Brownback. Multiple testimonies, including from Brownback himself, say otherwise. What do you have to say about who can speak to this?
Yeah, I think, JPMorgan Chase needs to get its story straight on how it treated Sam Brownback's organization. Jamie Dimon's statements today at the annual shareholder meeting are really about the fifth or sixth explanation we've received, and all of them have been different and contradictory. And so
the Wall Street Journal said that, the Wall Street Journal itself and some other outlets are saying that Jamie and his pantomimes are well aware of all this, but I don't know, they're playing it safe, or maybe they didn't know and a different executive made the decision unbeknownst to them. I'm trying to play fair to everyone, but what do you think?
Well, I think the changing stories and these allegations that people probably know what are going on deeper down into the organization goes to the very point of David Bahnsen's shareholder resolution, which is to shed light on their mistreatment of not just NCRF, but other organizations that have been debanked recently for what seem like political and religious reasons. And without that investigation and them clearing the air, and if they find problems, fixing those problems, then this public relations problem will persist for them, I believe.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, my name is Jay Sapsford. I'm the fellow who wrote the story over the weekend in the Wall Street Journal. I appreciate you inviting me to the call, and thank you for taking the time to walk us through this. I have a question for Mr. Shepard, if I will. You mentioned in your comments about the point about banks being too big to fail, being very large. As you know, JPMorgan is the largest institution by assets in the country. And ranks among the top in the world. I wonder if there is why the folks on the call haven't made more of that, given the implicit understanding is that if a bank is too big to fail, that it would require a taxpayer bailout should it come into a situation that poses a risk to the financial system. I just wonder if you could riff a little bit more on that thought. Thank you.
Absolutely, Jay. Thank you. And I think we all agree that too big to fail banks have to be too big to discriminate because they get so many. Not only are they backstopped in the end by all American taxpayers, but they are, in a sense, public utilities. They have the special relationship. I mean, they put the members on the New York Board of Reserve Committee, and they have the special relationship with Treasury and the Fed, and they get grow and grow when government policies make other banks go under. JPMorgan just was able to swallow up First Republic, get even bigger, have even more of a chokehold over the economy. So in effect, they're public utilities, and they ought to be, if not entirely run like the local waterworks, at very least overseen to make sure that they are never discriminating in any way against any Americans on the basis of viewpoint. And Chase, whatever the laws that's come up with the new stories today, whatever Jamie Dimon huffily insists, is obviously discriminating on the basis of viewpoint and discriminating against entirely legal and necessary industries like petroleum and reliable energy companies. And so in answer to why we haven't made a bigger deal about it, speaking only for myself, I've written about this constantly, but in order for it to become the big deal that it needs to be, I'd love to see the House Financial Services Committee review all of this and check in with Jamie Dimon in one of those insistent ways it can with a subpoena, and get a proper explanation of what's going on over there and what they're going to do very specifically to change.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Jerry Boyer, Boyer Research. question for Ambassador Brownback. Today, during the shareholder meeting, Chairman Dimon said that they had not offered an apology, that the reason that the account was canceled was because the particular party in question, which presumably is you, didn't fill out the paperwork, and that you were told if you would fill out, or the party in question, who clearly is you, were willing to fill out the paperwork. They had offered to reinstate your account. So they said they did not apologize. You didn't fill out the paperwork, and they offered to give your account back if you were willing to do that. Did those align with the actual facts of the matter?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say they don't. In the October letter, and we've got this letter and we can provide it to you, they apologized for not following their own timelines. In other words, they shut the account down before they gave us a chance to repair any deficiencies that they claimed in it. And he apologizes in that letter for not doing that. And then they say, okay, we might reinstate you. And we have this in a transcript of a phone call, and the call was recorded so we can provide you the transcript. If we do these three things, which basically are disclosure of who gives money to the NCRF, 10% or more, and who you're going to back as political candidates, we might. Then they later say, no, we wouldn't ask that kind of information, but we've got a transcript of them asking this kind of information. And we said, look, if that's your grounds for reopening, we're not interested in having a bank account with you because we're not going to disclose that kind of information. And we really find it questionable whether you would ask any group to disclose this kind of information. And we had moved and found another bank at that point in time. So that's why I say the facts are important in this case. And that's the facts, and we have the transcripts, and we have the recorded messaging that you can listen to if you'd like, or anybody on this call we'd provide it to.
I would like to ask a question, if I might. This is Kevin Stockland at the Epoch Times. And my question is, have banks become akin to public utilities in the sense that they're providing an essential service to the public? And so what are the ramifications for people who are excluded from the banking system?
Well, you can't live your life if you don't have a bank account or access to payment processing. So it's essential to being able to live your life and operate in the marketplace. And so it's, as Scott said, it's essential, especially that these large banks who serve millions and millions, I think Chase has over 60 million customers, commit to non-discrimination in their services. There's an incredible amount of pressure on large financial institutions to debank people because of, their religious or political beliefs that are out of line with progressive values. And banks need to resist that. And for the folks who are debanked, that's a terrifying prospect. And I think, it's hard enough for people to go and scramble and find some other bank account with probably lesser services than some of these big accounts can provide. But the real damage is to civil society. When there's a threat that a bank will debank you because of your religious or political beliefs, it chills people's willingness to exercise their free speech and religious freedom rights and to engage in the democratic process. So banks have to take seriously the threat they pose by having these unbounded policies that allow them to do just that, debank people for viewpoint-based reasons, and fix that.
Well, and just to add to the public utility analogy, and I think it's not even just an analogy, Kevin, to your point, it's effective fact, is that you consider the relationship between these too big to fail banks and the current administration. The two whole of government initiatives of the Biden administration are decarbonization on political schedules and diversity, which are equity-based discrimination. What equity means is discriminating against disfavored, non-diverse groups. Now, it turns out that those are also the two lead prongs of ESG. The S prong is equity-based discrimination. The G prong, or the E prong, is discrimination against reliable energy companies and political schedule decarbonization. So what you've got is the banks that are backstopped by all taxpayers working hand in hand with this administration to achieve its two most important for it and arguably most partisan and controversial proposals. So in every meaningful way, these banks are public utilities, and to allow them to discriminate is really to look forward to the end of functioning democracy in fundamental ways.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Great. This concludes our press conference. Please email media@adflegal.org if you have any further questions or any resources needed. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.